August 9th, 1944. Pranjani, Serbia, Nazi-occupied Yugoslavia. Claire Musgrove crouches in a hay barn, listening. German patrols pass within 50 yards. He's been hiding for weeks, moving from village to village, never staying more than 2 nights in one place. He's 20 years old, a ball turret gunner from a B-24 Liberator. 3 weeks ago, his bomber was shot down over Romania. He bailed out. The others were captured immediately. He got lucky. He landed miles away from his crew in Serbian territory. And the Serbians didn't turn him in. They fed him instead. Stale bread, goat's milk, whatever they had, which wasn't much. The Germans had taken everything, crops, livestock, young men. But the Serbian villagers shared what little remained with an enemy airman, a stranger who'd been dropping bombs on their continent. Now Musgrove waits in the darkness with over 250 other Allied airmen, Americans, British, Canadians, all shot down, all hidden, all waiting for a miracle that military command says is impossible. They're about to attempt the largest rescue of downed airmen in history, and if it fails, they'll all be executed. Between 1943 and 1944, the U.S. 15th Air Force flew over 20,000 bombing missions from bases in Italy, targeting German oil refineries in Ploiești, Romania. The missions were brutal, flak so thick you could walk on it, fighters swarming like hornets. 1 in 4 bombers didn't come home. Hundreds of American airmen bailed out over Yugoslavia. The Germans captured some, executed others, but many fell into the hands of Serbian peasants in the countryside, people living under Nazi occupation, people who had every reason to hand over enemy combatants to save themselves. They didn't. They hid them, fed them, moved them from village to village in the dead of night. Serbian women treated wounds in makeshift hospitals. Old men stood guard while German patrols searched nearby. Children were told, "If you see soldiers, run to the barn and warn the Americans." The penalty for hiding Allied airmen was immediate execution, not just for the person hiding them, for the entire family, sometimes the entire village. They did it anyway. By summer 1944, reports reached OSS agents in Bari, Italy. Hundreds of American airmen were trapped behind enemy lines in Serbia, protected by a guerrilla force called the Chetniks, led by General Draža Mihailović. The OSS started planning a rescue. But there was a problem. The British had abandoned Mihailović months earlier. They'd switched their support to Tito's communist partisans, considering them better organized, more effective. The Americans were ordered to follow suit. Officially, Mihailović was no longer an ally, but unofficially, he was the only one protecting American pilots. OSS agent George Vujnović had a decision to make: follow political orders or save American lives. He chose lives. He assembled a 3-man team to parachute into Serbia, make contact with Mihailović, and organize an evacuation. The mission was codenamed Operation Halyard. The team, Lieutenant George Mussolin, Master Sergeant Michael Rajatic, and radio operator Arthur Jibilian, Jibby. All 3 were of Serbian descent. All 3 volunteered, knowing they could be court-martialed for disobeying orders. They prepared to jump. Then the British tried to stop them. British pilots were assigned to fly the team into Yugoslavia. Twice, the coordinates were accidentally wrong, dropping them over partisan territory instead of Chetnik territory, a death sentence. The message was clear. The British didn't want this mission to succeed. Mussolini had enough. He demanded an American pilot and an American plane. On the night of August 2, 1944, they jumped. Jibby, the radio operator, landed in a cornfield. "My best landing of all my parachuting," he'd say later. Within minutes, Chetnik soldiers surrounded them, not as captors, as protectors. They were led to General Mihailovich's headquarters in Pranjani, a small village in the hills of central Serbia. What they found there was staggering. Over 250 Allied airmen, hidden, fed, protected, alive. But alive wasn't enough. They needed to get out. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. Build an airstrip in Nazi-occupied territory large enough to land C-47 cargo planes without the Germans noticing. Then fly the planes in, load the airmen, and fly out in broad daylight. It shouldn't work. It couldn't work. They started building anyway. Serbian peasants, men, women, children, worked day and night. No machinery, no tools, just hands, shovels, and oxen-drawn carts. They flattened a field, removed rocks, filled holes. They worked in silence, listening for German patrols. The airstrip took 6 days. It was rough, uneven, barely long enough, but it was finished. On August 9th, the first C-47 appeared in the sky. The airmen couldn't believe it. They'd been told rescue was impossible. Command had written them off. And now a U.S. cargo plane was descending through German-controlled airspace, about to land in an open field surrounded by enemy forces. The pilot, Captain Nick Lalich, brought the plane down hard. The wheels hit dirt, bounced violently. The plane skidded to a stop. The rear cargo door dropped open. "Move! Move! Move!" Airmen sprinted across the field and climbed aboard. 12 men. Then the engines roared, the plane turned, accelerated down the makeshift runway, and lifted into the sky. It worked. 6 more C-47s followed that day, escorted by P-51 Mustang fighters. Each plane landed, loaded airmen, took off. The operation was so fast, so precise, the Germans didn't realize what was happening until it was over. In 2 days, August 9th and 10th, 272 Allied airmen were evacuated. Not a single man was lost. Not a single plane was shot down. But the mission wasn't over. More airmen kept arriving, shot down over Romania, guided through the hills by Chetnik soldiers, hidden in villages, brought to Pranjani. The OSS team stayed. What was supposed to be a 2-week mission turned into 6 months. By December 27, 1944, when the last plane lifted off, 512 Allied airmen had been rescued. Americans, British, Canadians, French, Italians, Russians, all brought out safely, all because Serbian peasants and Chetnik soldiers refused to abandon them. It was the greatest rescue of downed airmen in military history. And then the U.S. government buried it. The mission was classified, secret. The airmen were ordered not to speak about it. No medals, no recognition, no news coverage. The story was erased. Why? Because acknowledging the rescue meant acknowledging Mihailovich, a man the Allies had officially abandoned, a man who was now politically inconvenient. In 1946, Tito's communist government took control of Yugoslavia. Mihailovich was arrested, tried for treason, and executed by firing squad. The Americans who owed him their lives were forbidden from testifying at his trial, forbidden from speaking his name, forbidden from telling the truth. Claire Musgrove, the airman hiding in the barn, went home to the United States. He got married, had children, built a life. But he never forgot the Serbian villagers who fed him when they had nothing, the old woman who bandaged his wounds, the Chetnik soldiers who stood guard while he slept. For 60 years, he couldn't talk about it. In 2005, 61 years after the rescue, the U.S. State Department finally acknowledged the truth. President Harry Truman had secretly awarded Mihailovich the Legion of Merit in 1948, the highest honor given to a foreign national, but classified the award immediately. Now, finally, it was presented publicly to Mihailovic's daughter, Gordana. The rescued airmen, those still alive, attended the ceremony. Old men now, in their 80s and 90s. They stood and saluted the daughter of the man who saved them. Claire Musgrove was there. He told reporters, "We were ordered to forget, but you can't forget people who gave you their last piece of bread when they were starving. You can't forget men who died protecting you when they didn't have to." Another airman, Richard Fellman, had spent decades fighting to have Mihailovic recognized. He'd been threatened, dismissed, ignored, but he never stopped. "The Chetniks risked everything for us," he said. "The least we could do was tell the truth." In 2010, a memorial was erected in the United States honoring Operation Halyard. The plaque reads, 5M12 Allied Airmen Rescued, 0 Casualties, the greatest rescue mission in U.S. military history. The text appears in English and Serbian. Years after the rescue, a reporter asked one of the Serbian peasants who'd helped build the airstrip, "Why did you do it? You could have been killed. Your family could have been killed. Why risk everything for enemy soldiers?" The old man looked confused by the question. They weren't enemies. They were men far from home, and we don't abandon men who need help. That's not who we are. The reporter pressed, "But the Germans would have executed you?" The man shrugged, "Maybe, but I'd rather die helping someone than live knowing I didn't." That simple statement, spoken by an illiterate farmer in Nazi-occupied Serbia, contains more moral clarity than 1,000 political speeches. Operation Halyard wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a declaration. Even in war, humanity survives. Even under occupation, decency persists. Even when governments betray their allies, ordinary people remember what honor means. The Serbian villagers who hid American airmen had nothing to gain and everything to lose. They did it anyway. The Chetnik soldiers who protected the airstrip were fighting on 2 fronts, against the Nazis and against communist forces. They still made time to save American lives. The OSS agents who parachuted into Yugoslavia defied orders, risked court-martial, and spent 6 months behind enemy lines. They never asked for recognition. And the airmen who were rescued spent 60 years carrying a secret, waiting for permission to say thank you. War is about nations and politics and strategies, but survival is about something simpler. A piece of bread offered to a stranger, a woman who bandages wounds without asking which side you fought for, a man who builds an airstrip by hand because 250 lives depend on it. In 1944, the governments of the world made calculations. They weighed political alliances, strategic advantages, post-war positioning. They decided Mihailovic was expendable. But the airmen he saved never forgot. And in the end, truth doesn't stay buried forever. Claire Musgrove died in 2018 at age 95. At his funeral, his grandson read a letter Musgrove had written decades earlier but never sent. To the people of Serbia, I don't know your names. I don't know if you survived the war, but I want you to know I made it home. I had children. They had children. There are lives in this world that exist because you shared your bread. Thank you. 512 airmen came home because of Operation Halyard. Those airmen had families, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, thousands of lives, an entire constellation of human beings exist because Serbian peasants chose mercy over safety. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a bomb or a bullet. It's a piece of bread offered to someone who has every reason to be your enemy. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your opponent. It's remaining human when the world gives you every excuse not to be.